Mm. There are some numbers that live in your body long after you stop looking at them. The balance I saw that Thursday morning was one of those numbers. $11,240. Gone. Not transferred. Not invested. Just gone. And the silence that followed when I asked about it, that kind of silence doesn't just fill a room, it rearranges it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is not important. What's important is that I was 28 years old, working as a junior graphic designer at a mid-sized marketing firm in Columbus, Ohio, living in my parents' house. Temporarily, we all agreed, after my lease ended and the apartment I wanted fell through. Temporarily turned into 8 months. 8 months of contributing to groceries, utilities, and the general upkeep of the household that had never really felt like mine to begin with. Not because the house wasn't nice, but because there was always a room that mattered more than mine. Always a chair at the table that sat a little higher, and that chair belonged to my brother. His name was Derek. Derek was 32, between jobs the way a river is between banks. Technically true, but not quite capturing the full picture. He had big ideas. My parents called them visions. He'd had a landscaping business that didn't landscape, a drop-shipping venture that dropped without shipping, and most recently, a plan to open a food truck that served what he called elevated comfort food. My mother said he had an entrepreneurial spirit. I said I had $11,000 in a savings account and a plan to move out by March. The account was a joint one, technically. Set up years ago when I was 19 and my parents had co-signed, back when I needed their credit history to open anything. I had meant to transfer it to a solo account. I had been meaning to do that for 2 years. I kept pushing it off the way you push off scheduling a dentist appointment. Not urgent, not urgent, not urgent, and then suddenly very urgent. I noticed the number on a Thursday morning because I was calculating my moving costs. First month, last month, security deposit on a 1-bedroom in Clintonville I'd been eyeing. I opened the app while eating toast at the kitchen counter. I looked at the balance. I looked at it again. I set my toast down, $11,240. I had deposited my last 2 paychecks in there. There should have been closer to 18. I did not say anything that morning. I closed the app. I went to work. I sat at my desk and I stared at a logo I was supposed to be refining, and I thought about whether I had transferred money somewhere and forgotten, whether there was an auto payment I'd set up, whether I was misremembering the balance. I went through every reasonable explanation I could find. I gave each one a fair trial. By lunch, I had acquitted all of them. That evening, I sat at dinner, pasta, garlic bread, my mother's specialty, and I watched my family pass food around the table, and I waited. Not for an explanation, just to see if anyone would say anything. My father asked Derek how the food truck planning was going. Derek said he'd found a truck online, good price, needed some work, but nothing serious. My mother said that sounded promising. I watched her spoon pasta onto her plate. No one looked at me. I said quietly, "Did someone make a withdrawal from my savings account?" My father put his fork down. Not the way you put a fork down when you're finished eating. The way you put a fork down when you need both hands free for whatever comes next. My mother looked at the pasta. Derek looked at his phone. "We had to move some funds around," my father said. "Temporarily?" I want to tell you that I stood up and said something devastating. I want to tell you I had the exact right words lined up, but what I actually did was sit very still and say, "How much?" 6,800? The garlic bread was still warm. I remember that. I remember thinking that detail was absurd, that something could smell that good in the same moment I was understanding what had happened. For the truck, my father said, Derek needed the deposit before Sunday or he'd lose the listing. It was a window. We didn't want him to miss the window. "That's my money," I said. I said it the way you state a fact to someone who already knows the fact and has decided it doesn't apply to them. "It's a loan," my mother said, still not looking at me. "He'll pay it back." Derek said, "I was going to tell you." "When?" He picked up his phone again. "When the paperwork cleared." I looked at my father. I looked at the man who had co-signed that account 9 years ago, who had access to it because I had been 19 and trusted the people sitting at this table, and I said, "You took money from my account without asking me." "We knew you'd say no," my mother said. And there it was. She said it so simply, so matter-of-factly, the way you'd explain why you didn't bother checking the weather before grabbing an umbrella. "We knew you'd say no, so we didn't ask." As though my refusal would have been the problem. as though the obstacle was my consent, not the taking. I put my fork down too. I pushed back my chair. I said, I'm going to need that money back. It's tied up right now, Derek said. In the deposit. We can't. I'm going to need it back, I said again. I went upstairs. I sat on my bed. I opened the banking app again and I looked at the transaction history. The withdrawal had been made 11 days ago. 11 days. I had been living in this house for 11 days with $6,800 missing from my account, eating dinner with these people, asking my mother if she needed anything from the grocery store, and nobody had said a word. I looked at the date. It was a Wednesday. 11 days ago was a Sunday. The same Sunday I had made pasta with my mother and watched a movie on the couch with my father and genuinely thought, that things were getting easier. That living here was temporary but not terrible. That maybe I had been too hard on my family. That the distance I'd always felt was something I had invented or exaggerated. I had not invented it. I had not exaggerated it. What I had done was mistake proximity for closeness. I opened my laptop. I pulled up every lease listing I'd bookmarked. I started calculating what I could still afford. The Clintonville one-bedroom was out. I could do a studio. A smaller studio than I'd wanted, in a neighborhood slightly farther from work, but it was mine. I could do that. I could do that by the end of the month if I moved the timeline up. I did not sleep much that night, not because I was crying. I want to be clear about that. I cried a little early on, the kind of crying that isn't sadness so much as pressure being released, air escaping something that had been sealed too long. After that, I was just awake. Just thinking. Listening to the house settle around me. This house I had grown up in and never quite grown into, and I was doing arithmetic. Not just financial arithmetic. The other kind. The kind where you add up the years and the silences and the dinners, where Derek's ideas were visions and my ideas were concerns, and you see what the total is. You let yourself see the actual number. The next morning, my mother made coffee. She put a cup on the counter near me without saying anything, a peace offering in a mug. I looked at it for a long time. We're going to pay it back, she said. Okay, I said. Derek is serious about this. The truck is a real plan this time. I thought about the landscaping business, the drop shipping. I thought about the phrase this time. I thought about how hope, when it's not applied equally to all your children, stops being hope and starts being favoritism wearing hope's clothes. Mom, I said, did it occur to either of you to ask me first? She was quiet. I would have said no. I said, you're right about that. I would have said no because it's my money and I've been saving it for 2 years to move out. You knew that. You knew exactly what that account was for and you took from it anyway. I know what Derek needed. What did I need, Mom? Do you know? She looked at her coffee. She said, you're always so practical. I turned that over. So practical. As though practicality was a character flaw. As though wanting to keep the money I'd earned was somehow less valid than Derek's latest window, his latest vision, his latest reason why this time was different. I'm moving out, I said, by the end of the month. She looked up. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. I called my friend Jasmine on my lunch break. She'd been telling me for 2 years that the joint account situation was an accident waiting to happen. I did not lead with you were right. Because Jasmine is one of those friends who, when she's right, already knows it and doesn't need you to confirm it. I just said, they took $6,800. There was a pause. Then she said, okay, do you need my couch while you find a place? I said no. I had a plan. She said, do you need me to be angry on your behalf? I said yes, actually. So she was angry on my behalf for about 4 minutes, which was exactly what I needed. That evening, I sent my father an email, not a text. An email. I wanted there to be a record. I wanted full sentences and correct punctuation and a timestamp. I told him that I expected the money returned within 30 days. I told him that I would be moving out and that when I did, I would be removing myself from the joint account entirely, and that if the money was not returned by then, I would have no choice but to pursue it formally. I did not use the word lawyer, but I used enough words around it that the shape was clear. He came to my room that night, knocked, which he didn't always do, stood in the doorway. We didn't think you'd miss it, he said. Not right away. You don't check that account much. I check it when I need it, I said. We thought we'd have it back before. Before I noticed, he was quiet. I want to ask you something, I said, and I want you to actually think about it before you answer. I waited. He waited. If I had done this to Derek, if I had taken money from his account for my own thing, without asking, what would have happened? He did not answer, which was an answer. I've been in this house for 8 months, I said. I've paid into this household. I've helped with groceries and the electric bill, and I've never once asked for anything back. I asked for one thing, for my savings to stay where I put them. That's all. Your mother and I have supported you your whole, I know, I said. I know you have, and I've been grateful. But being grateful doesn't mean my account is available for withdrawal when a window comes up. He left. Not angry. At least not visibly. Just quiet in the way that people go quiet when they've run out of justifications but aren't ready to call what they did wrong. I found the studio apartment on a Saturday. It was in Bexley, smaller than I wanted, 3rd floor, no dishwasher. The light through the west-facing window in the late afternoon was extraordinary. I stood in the empty room and I looked at that light and I thought about the garlic bread. I thought about all the nights I had eaten at that table and felt the specific loneliness of being surrounded by people who loved you selectively, who loved you when it was convenient, who chose you when there was no better option and redirected their energy when there was. I signed the lease that afternoon. I did not make a big announcement. I did not sit my parents down for a formal conversation. I started packing in the evenings, quietly, a box at a time, books first, then clothes, then the small things that accumulate in a space and make it feel like yours. The lamp I'd bought at a thrift store, the print I'd framed myself, the coffee maker I'd purchased because my parents kept the communal one in the kitchen, and sometimes Derek used it at 2 a.m. for reasons I never understood. My mother watched me pack on a Tuesday evening. She stood in the doorway of my room the way my father had. That doorway was getting a lot of use, and she said, "You're really going?" "I told you I was." "I thought She stopped. "Changed my mind." She nodded a little. "Mom," I said, "I need you to understand something. I'm not leaving because I'm angry. I'm leaving because this has been the plan all along. The account thing just accelerated it." "That's all," she said. "We're family." "I know," I said. "Family takes care of each other." I folded a sweater. I put it in the box. "Yes," I said. "They do." The money came back in 2 installments. The first $3,000, the Friday before I moved out. My father handed me a check without looking at me, the way you hand someone change when you're a cashier and the transaction has been awkward. I said thank you. The second installment came 3 weeks later, after 2 follow-up emails and 1 very direct phone call in which I used a more specific version of the word lawyer. The full amount, to the penny. I deposited it into a new account. Solo. My name only. No co-signers, no access, no windows. On moving day, Jasmine helped me carry boxes. We made 4 trips. By noon, everything I owned was in the Bexley studio with the good afternoon light and no dishwasher. We sat on the floor because I didn't have furniture yet, and we ate sandwiches, and she said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "Quiet." "I feel quiet." She nodded like she understood that. She did understand it. That evening, alone for the first time in 8 months, I set up my coffee maker. I arranged my 3 plants on the windowsill. I put my print up with 2 command strips, slightly crooked, and decided to fix it later, and then decided it was fine, crooked. I sat on my sleeping bag on the floor because the bed frame was being delivered Thursday, and I opened my laptop and I worked on a freelance project for 2 hours. The good kind of working where the time disappears. Around 9, I got a text from Derek. It said, "Heard you moved out." Congrats, I guess. I read it twice. Then I put my phone face down and went back to my design. What I want to tell you, what I think about when I look back on those weeks, is not about the money. The money was a symptom. What it revealed was something I had known in the background for years, that in the accounting my family kept, my sacrifices were expected, and Derek's needs were emergencies. That when I said I needed something, the response was, "You're so practical." That when Derek needed something, the response was to find a window and climb through it, using whatever was available, including money that wasn't theirs. Some people will read this and say, "But it's family." And I understand that. I do. Family is complicated, and love is complicated, and I am not here to tell you that my parents don't love me. I think they do, in whatever way they're capable of, But love that helps itself to your savings account without asking is not the kind of love you build your life around. It's the kind you file away carefully and refer to when you're deciding how much access to give. I still talk to my parents, holidays, the occasional Sunday phone call. I am cordial and I am kind, and I bring a dish when I'm invited for dinner. Derek's food truck, as of last I heard, was still in the planning stages. Different truck, new timeline. My mother still calls his ideas visions. I call my ideas plans, and I keep them in accounts that only I can access. The studio has a window that catches the light at 4 in the afternoon, and I've started keeping a succulent on the sill that is doing extremely well. Every morning, I make coffee in my own kitchen with my own machine, and I drink it standing up while the neighborhood wakes outside my window, and the number in my account is the number I put there, and no one moves it while I sleep. That is not a small thing. I want to be clear about that. That is, in fact, everything,